Hello, so for our lesson plan, we are doing a two-step equation, and we decided to use procedural knowledge. And so for our lesson plan, we are trying to focus on using those procedural steps to solve the two-step equation, and also really want Savannah to master inverse operations and solving for x. We also really want to focus on her being able to explain her reasoning behind how she got an answer, and also her explaining using the procedural steps. So that's our main focus. And then our instructional objectives, you can see right here. And so basically we wanted our objectives to follow along with her IEP goals. And so one of her IEP goals is to solve like a linear equation using like a cheat sheet. So we'll be having like a poster board that has all the procedural knowledge as like an anchor chart, and that will be her cheat sheet. And then our other objective is being able to explain it, because that also is another goal of hers, is to explain and justify her answers with only two probing questions. And so then here is where we have our Common Core standard, which also ties back into the objective. So our prior knowledge that you need to be able to know, which we will be reviewing during the lesson plan, during the I do part for when the teacher is modeling, is to understand inverse operations for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. We also wanted to incorporate vocabulary of like terms that are in an equation. So during the I do, again, we'll be using that vocabulary for review along with the inverse operations. So then some common errors that we think that will be present with Savannah is, obviously inverse operations, using or looking at her pre-test, like she did really good with the multiplication part, but she really did struggle with the parts that had to do with the inverse operations with addition, subtraction, combining like terms, solving for the variable. Also with her word problems, she was doing the opposite, like inverse operation. So if she was like subtracting 6 from both sides, she was like adding them instead. So we really wanted to focus on that. And so our equations basically are trying to get her to understand like the operations for the inverse operations. In our PLAF up here, we kind of we did discuss her scores from her pre-test. We divided them up into sections for each part. So these kind of just explain what she got. Then so for instructional support, we want to use explicit instruction to be able to solve like the one-step equation first and then move on to the two-step equation. Then also, so our next part, I already did talk about the IEP goals and how those aligned with the Common Core standard and as well as the objectives. Some instructional technology we're going to be using is an anchor poster with the procedural steps, so that would be a low tech. And they are provided iPads, so we put that under assistive technology. For our cultural and linguistic responsive instruction, we decided that since it's a smaller group, we will be allowing them to talk freely, but we want to state in the beginning, like, this is a respectful environment, respect other people's opinions and answers. If someone else is talking, you don't talk, and just giving everyone a fair chance to be able to explain and talk. So then getting into the actual lesson plan, we've started what the teacher will do, so the I do part. Our first equation, we wanted to start with a one-step equation, x plus 7 equals 10. And we wanted to use a one-step equation so that we could review the inverse operations and as well as vocabulary of an equation. And so throughout this part, we have like some questions that like we're going to say to the whole class, but also we want to as well like focus in on Savannah to be able to have her contribute to the lesson. She is very introverted and she does fall asleep during class. She's pretty shy. So we wanted to be able to make sure that she is focusing and paying attention and incorporating her to like answer questions. That also goes with one of her objectives, or not objectives, goals, to be able to give her 2 probing questions and only 2 probing questions for the main question. So she gets like 2 tries basically to answer the question, and then we're kind of just going to move on or have someone else explain to the class like what the question we have for them. So again, with like the first part, like one of the questions is, when I say the word inverse, what do you think of that? Like we want to have them explain that to us. And then um, also like another question would be like, what is the inverse operation of the constant 7? And then have them explain like what that means. And so then the we do part, this is where we're going to do together, and that's where we're doing the 2-step equation, which is 3x plus 3 equals 12. We also have right here our procedural steps, which is first find the term with the variable, second do the inverse operation, 3 balance the equation, 4 cancel to isolate the variable. And so with this part, we want to be doing this with the class and having them kind of explain like the steps for doing the 2-step equation and like why we're doing that. And it's going to be more of like a class discussion so that we're both doing it together, me and the peer or the students. And also, again, we want to focus in on Savannah being paying attention, you know, trying to have her contribute to the discussion. And then the you do part, we have a equation 4x plus 10 equals 14. And here we're going to have the students work on this by themselves for a few minutes and then come back as a class and have them talk to their peers and kind of discuss like what steps they took to get to their answer and what their answer is. And really at this part, we want to ask Savannah if she can explain how she used the steps and what she did to get to her answer, because this also like ties back into her goal to be able to explain and justify her answers with only 2 probing questions. And this will help her, you know, also work on being able to talk in front of her peers and explain in front of people, because that is something she struggles with, and she's also very introverted. And so this is where we really want her to be able to explain her process and thinking through it. And yeah, so this is our lesson plan.